Hey, Creepy Crew. Big shout out to everyone who's already subscribed. You guys are amazing. If you haven't yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and be part of the Creepy Crew. Most of you watch without subscribing, so let's change that. Also, drop a like and leave a comment. I always took the old bus home after my late shift, exhausted and hungry. It was routine. Same stop, same half-empty bus, same quiet ride through dimly lit streets. One evening, as I sat near the back, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I opened it, expecting spam, but instead, I saw a photo. A blurry shot of a bus stop. My bus stop. And standing there, waiting, was someone who looked exactly like me. Same jacket, same slouched posture. For a second, my brain refused to connect the dots. It had to be a joke. Maybe one of my friends messing around? I closed the message and put my phone back in my pocket, deciding not to feed into it. The next day, as I stepped onto the bus, my phone buzzed again. Another photo. This time, I was in it. No mistake. I was mid-step, walking toward the bus, my face slightly turned as if I was looking for something. Or someone. That sent a chill down my spine. Someone was watching me. Someone close enough to take these pictures and send them in real time. I scanned the bus, but saw only the usual tired faces. At my stop, I glanced around, but there was no one suspicious. Maybe a random prank? Maybe some stranger who thought this was funny? I forced myself to breathe and let it go. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. At the bus stop, I caught glimpses of people standing too still, disappearing when I turned my head. My skin crawled when I walked home at night, but there was never anyone there when I looked back. I told myself I was imagining it, that it was all in my head. Then, a week later, another photo came. This time, I was outside a small cafe near my work. It was taken during my lunch break. I recognized my own expression, tense, wary, like I had already sensed something was wrong. Fear twisted in my stomach. Someone was close enough to follow me during the day, not just at night, and I had no idea who they were. I confronted my friends, my co-workers, asked if any of them were behind it. Their confusion seemed real. No nervous laughter, no guilty expressions, just blank faces and concerned questions. That night I barely slept. Every rustle outside made me sit up. Every shadow looked like a figure watching from the street. I thought about going to security, maybe even the police. But what could I say? Someone is sending me pictures of myself? It wasn't a crime. There was no direct threat. Instead, I tried to change my habits. I took a different route home, waited at different stops, even walked extra blocks just to throw off whoever was following me. But the feeling never left. A few days later, another message came. This time, the photo showed the entrance to my apartment building. The angle was low, taken from right outside the door, as if the person had been standing just a few steps away. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just someone following me anymore. They knew where I lived. They had been right outside my home. Before I could process that, another message appeared. You should be more careful. A chill ran through me. This was a direct warning. Not a prank. Not a coincidence. Someone was watching me, and they wanted me to know it. For the first time, I felt real fear. The kind that makes your hands shake and your breathing uneven. This was no longer something I could ignore. I grabbed my jacket and headed straight to the police station. Filing the report took longer than I expected. I explained everything, how it started, the photos, the messages. An officer took notes, asking detailed questions. but I could tell he wasn't sure what to make of it. "We'll check the security cameras in your area," he said. "But in the meantime, document everything. If anything else happens, call us immediately." His words didn't reassure me. They couldn't. The police wouldn't camp outside my building to keep watch. I was still on my own. For the next few days, I tried to change my routine, left work at different times, took different buses, even shopped at stores farther from home. But the feeling never left me, like I was being watched, like someone was always a step behind me. Then, one night, as I was approaching my building, I saw it. A shadow near the entrance. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But as I got closer, the figure didn't move. It stood perfectly still, almost blending into the darkness. My pulse hammered in my ears. I could have turned around, could have walked away and called the police. But something inside me snapped. I was done feeling helpless. "Who the hell are you?" My voice was sharper than I expected, cutting through the quiet street. The figure flinched. Just a little. Then, without a word, they turned and hurried down a side alley. I caught a glimpse of their face, a face I recognized. My mind struggled to place it, but then it hit me. An old colleague. Someone I used to work with. Someone I had a bad falling out with. We had clashed over a project, and it got ugly. Management had taken my side, and he had been furious. After that, he avoided me, barely speaking a word until he eventually left the company. And now, he was standing outside my home. I barely slept that night. Every noise, every shadow outside my window sent a fresh wave of panic through me. The next morning, I called the police again. Gave them the name of the man I saw. They promised to check the security footage to see if he had been caught on camera. A few days later, they called me back. They had identified him. It was exactly who I thought. When the police questioned him, he admitted everything. He had been following me for weeks, taking pictures, sending messages. He said he wanted me to feel unsettled, to be constantly looking over my shoulder, to know what it's like to lose control. He never planned to physically hurt me, at least that's what he claimed. He just wanted revenge in his own twisted way. The police arrested him for harassment, and I had to give an official statement. Even after knowing he was caught, the fear didn't fade overnight. The thought of how close he had been, how easily things could have escalated, kept me awake at night. I quit my job, moved to a new apartment on the other side of the city. I needed to start over. Even now, I double-check my locks before bed. I watch my surroundings more carefully than ever, because sometimes the real danger isn't a stranger in the dark. It's someone you already know. My day usually started with a drive to college in an old sedan I got from my parents. It wasn't much, but it got me where I needed to go. Every morning, I parked near the student cafeteria, where I liked to grab a quick coffee before class. That day was no different. I left my car in the usual spot, went inside, bought my coffee, and spent a few minutes scrolling through my phone before heading back. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed with a Snapchat notification. I opened it absent-mindedly, expecting some random meme from a friend. But instead, it was a picture of my car, taken from a distance. Parked exactly where I had left it. I stopped in my tracks. The angle of the shot made it clear. Whoever took this picture was standing somewhere in the parking lot. Right now. Or at least, they had been just moments ago. My eyes darted around, scanning the area, but everything looked normal. Students were walking to class, chatting, carrying backpacks. No one was watching me. No one seemed out of place. For a few seconds, I just stood there, gripping my phone, trying to figure out what to do. Then, I forced a laugh, shaking my head. It had to be a joke. Some classmate messing around. I had friends who would pull something like this. Annoying, sure, but not dangerous. I walked over to my car, got in, and locked the doors before texting a few people. Very funny. Who sent me a pic of my car just now? A few minutes passed. No responses. I started the engine, still glancing at my phone, waiting for someone to admit it. When I got to class, I asked around. Most people shrugged it off. One of my friends joked that I had a secret admirer. Another suggested maybe someone snapped it by accident. No one confessed. By the end of the day, I had mostly convinced myself that it didn't matter. Maybe it was just some random person, not even someone I knew. Maybe they meant nothing by it. Still, the thought sat in the back of my mind, making my stomach twist a little every time I looked at my phone. That night, before I went to bed, I decided to test something. Tomorrow, I wouldn't park in the same spot. I'd move my car to the far side of the lot, just to see if anything weird happened again. It was a small thing, just a precaution. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was already waiting for the next message. The next day went by normally. Classes, coffee, conversations that blurred together. Nothing strange happened. By the time I left campus, I was almost disappointed. It had been a dumb prank, and I had overreacted. But then, as I turned onto my street that evening, my phone buzzed again. Another Snapchat. I pulled into my driveway, put the car in park, and opened the message. A picture of my car. Same angle, same distance. But this time, it wasn't in the school parking lot. It was taken here, in front of my house. My hands tightened around my phone. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the picture, my mind racing. It wasn't just a joke. Someone had followed me. Someone had been close enough to my house to take this photo. I jumped out of the car, rushing to the front door, fumbling with my keys. My heart pounded in my ears as I locked the door behind me and flipped the deadbolt. I stood there for a moment, breathing hard, trying to think. Maybe it was still a prank. Someone who happened to see me at school, recognized my car, and thought it would be funny to freak me out. Maybe. But if that were true, why wouldn't they just say so? I moved to the living room, pulling back the curtain just an inch to look outside. The street was quiet, empty, nothing unusual. But it didn't feel empty. It felt like someone could still be out there, watching. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting. I had no proof that I was in danger. No threats. No messages. Just pictures. And yet, as I sat there in my locked house, staring at my phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't going to stop. Whoever was doing this wanted me to know they were watching. A few days later, I woke up in the middle of the night to flashes of light flickering through my window. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but then another flash came, and another. I sat up slowly, my heart pounding, and moved toward the window. Careful not to make any sudden movements, I pushed the curtain aside just a fraction of an inch and looked outside. There was a car parked across the street. I couldn't make out the details in the dark, but the silhouette was clear. Then, another flash. I barely caught the glow of a phone screen before it vanished. Someone was taking pictures. My hands shook as I reached for my phone. I dialed 911 with my thumb, my pulse hammering in my ears. The operator answered, and I kept my voice low as I explained what was happening. She asked if I could see the license plate. I tried, but the angle was wrong, and my vision was unfocused from fear. As I was still on the call, the car suddenly pulled away. Not fast. Not like they were panicking. Just a slow, steady retreat down the street before it turned the corner and disappeared. By the time the police arrived, there was nothing left to see. They knocked on my door, asked me a few questions, took my statement. I told them about the photos, the car, the flashes. One of my neighbors came outside in their robe and mentioned they had seen the same vehicle parked there before but hadn't thought much of it. Another neighbor said they'd noticed headlights, but never looked outside. The police made a report and assured me they'd have a patrol car pass by the area more frequently. But what could they really do? There was no crime, no clear threat. Just me, a young woman getting creepy pictures sent to her phone. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening for any sound from outside. I was exhausted, but my body refused to rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flashes again. The car, the vague outline of someone holding a phone, watching me. Days passed, but I never really recovered. I tried to live my life as usual, but I couldn't. Every time I stepped outside, I felt like I was being watched. I avoided going out after dark. I parked in different spots at school. I started skipping social events, even normal hangouts with friends. People noticed. At first, my friends were concerned. They asked me what was wrong, and I told them everything. At first, they listened. But after a while, I could tell some of them were getting tired of it. They didn't understand. To them, it was just some weird prank. I wasn't being physically hurt. There was no real danger, not in their eyes. A few of them started pulling away, avoiding the topic, changing the subject when I brought it up. I started questioning myself. What if they were right? What if I was overreacting? The police hadn't found anything. No one had followed up. Maybe it was just a bad joke that had gone too far. But every time I let my guard down, I'd remember the photos. The way they kept coming, each one creeping closer and closer to my home. And the worst part? I didn't know who it was. I had no face to attach to my fear, no person to avoid. It could have been a stranger. It could have been someone I knew. The uncertainty was the worst part. I started keeping my blinds closed even during the day. I left the hallway light on at night. Every time I walked to my car, I checked over my shoulder. I felt trapped in my own fear, and there was no way out. No answers, no resolution, just paranoia eating me alive. And then, suddenly, it stopped. No more pictures, no more flashes in the night, no strange cars parked outside. It was like whoever had been tormenting me just lost interest. At first, I didn't believe it. I kept waiting for another message, another sign that I was still being watched. Days passed. Then weeks. Nothing. The silence should have been a relief, but it wasn't. It felt wrong. Suspicious. I kept checking Snapchat, my hands shaking every time I opened the app. But there was nothing. No new messages, no saved snaps. Still, I couldn't relax. The damage was already done. I had changed. Even with no immediate threat, I couldn't shake the feeling that it could start again at any moment. Every unknown number that called my phone made my stomach drop. Every parked car with its lights off made my skin crawl. I had been forced to see the world differently, and there was no going back. I wasn't the same person anymore. I had lost something, some sense of security, of trust in the ordinary. And no matter how much time passed, I knew I would never really get it back. I've always been active on social media, and I especially like Snapchat for how easy it was to share pictures with friends. When a guy named Dan messaged me, I didn't think anything of it. He seemed like just another student. He talked about lectures, university parties, and all the usual stuff. The conversation flowed naturally, and I even thought about meeting him in person at some point. One evening, I got a message from him. It was a photo of me. I was at the mall with some friends recently, and the picture showed me there, walking past a store. No caption, no explanation, just a smirking emoji. I stared at it for a long time. I hadn't noticed anyone taking pictures of me that day. My first instinct was to brush it off, maybe joke about it. Maybe he had just happened to see me there and thought it would be funny. But something about it felt off. The more I thought about it, the more it didn't make sense. If he had seen me, why not say something? Why take a picture from a distance and send it to me without context? A weird feeling settled in my stomach, but I pushed it aside. I didn't tell my parents. I figured if it was just some joke, I'd look stupid for making a big deal out of it. A few days later, another message came in. Another photo. This time, it was outside my school. I was sitting at one of the tables near the entrance, eating lunch with a classmate. My hands felt cold as I stared at the image. This wasn't random. This wasn't a coincidence. He had been there, watching, following me, tracking where I was at specific times. I typed back immediately, asking him what the hell was going on. He replied almost instantly, "Funny, right?" That was it. I felt sick. There was nothing funny about it. My pulse was racing and my skin felt clammy. I showed my parents that night. My dad tried to calm me down, saying it was probably just some guy from a different class trying to get my attention in a dumb way. My mom wasn't convinced. She wanted to go straight to the school administration and report it. I hesitated. I didn't want to overreact, but deep down, I knew this wasn't normal. That sense of danger, the one I'd been trying to ignore, was only getting stronger. The next day, I realized Dan wasn't just messaging me. He was sending photos of my movements in real time. It was like he was playing some kind of cat and mouse game, waiting for moments when I let my guard down. I tried not to panic, but my heart clenched at the thought that he was somewhere nearby, phone in hand, watching me without me even noticing. My parents convinced me to go to my school counselor. The school security team was notified, and that's when I found out I wasn't the only one. Similar incidents had been reported in the area, but mine was different. There was undeniable proof. These were my photos, taken from different angles, at different times of the day. I was called into the principal's office to explain everything in detail, and my parents backed me up. The school administration decided to tighten security and review entry protocols, but none of that made me feel safer. Dan had already proved he could find me anywhere. One evening, I was riding my bike home as usual when another notification popped up. I glanced down at my phone. It was another picture. It showed me, mid-ride, pedaling past the supermarket I had just passed minutes ago. My breath caught. He was right behind me. I gripped the handlebars tighter and forced myself not to panic. My mind raced through different routes home, and I took a longer, more complicated way back just in case. The moment I got home, I showed my parents. My dad grabbed the phone and immediately called the police. A patrol car arrived quickly, and officers searched the area, but they found nothing. No suspicious person, no clues. It was like he had just disappeared. That night, I barely slept. The thought of someone being close enough to photograph me without being seen, it made me feel trapped, vulnerable. The next morning at school, the staff held a meeting with my classmates. They wanted to know if anyone had interacted with someone named Dan online, or had any idea who might be behind the account. No one admitted to anything. I started feeling like a cornered animal. A few days later, I was too afraid to even go out for groceries. That's when I got the news. They had found him. Dan wasn't some random stranger. He was a former student, expelled for repeated conflicts with teachers and classmates. He held a grudge against the school, especially against what he called the popular ones. He had been stalking and sending photos to multiple students as some twisted form of revenge. Hearing this, I felt a strange mix of relief and fear. He had been so close, unnoticed, for so long. The police were investigating whether he had any accomplices, but it seemed like he had been acting alone. My parents pushed for increased police presence around the school, and officers started patrolling regularly. I learned a hard lesson about trusting people online. From that day on, I was much more careful about who I added on social media. I stopped sharing my location so freely, because now I knew, sometimes the people watching aren't just watching. I like going to the small forest park near our town to get away from the noise of the streets and the rush of everyday life. Usually, I bring my phone and record short videos for Snapchat. I enjoy sharing the beauty of the trails and tall pines. That day, I walked a little further than usual and decided to show my friends the thick bushes near some old fallen trees. The sun was starting to dip lower, casting long shadows, but the place looked peaceful. I recorded a slow pan of the scenery, focusing on the tangled roots and the way the light filtered through the branches. When I got home later that evening, I was relaxing on the couch when my phone buzzed with a message from a friend. "Who was walking behind you?" At first, I thought he was joking. I hadn't noticed anyone. No footsteps, no voices, nothing. The forest had seemed empty. But curiosity got the better of me, so I replayed the video. At first, everything looked normal. Then, near the middle of the recording, I noticed it. A faint, blurry shape in the background. A silhouette in gray clothing moving between the trees. It wasn't just standing there. It seemed to be shifting, almost gliding from trunk to trunk. The way it moved made my stomach tighten. A chill ran through me as I realized I hadn't been alone in the woods. I tried to calm myself, telling myself it was probably just a random hiker who happened to be walking the same way. Maybe he didn't want to be on camera and stepped aside. That made sense, right? But something about the way the figure moved unsettled me. It wasn't just someone casually passing by. It looked like they were deliberately avoiding being seen. That was the part that bothered me the most. The forest paths were usually empty, especially on weekdays. Families came during weekends, but otherwise, it was quiet. Too quiet. I showed the video to a few friends. Every single one of them had the same reaction. "That's creepy." The way the figure moved was unnatural. Too smooth. Too quick. One friend even joked that it looked like something out of a horror movie. But I didn't find it funny. For the next few hours, I kept replaying the clip, analyzing every frame. The figure never came closer, never made any obvious movements toward me. But that didn't make me feel any better. If anything, it made things worse. Why was he there? Why was he hiding? The more I thought about it, the more I wanted to go back. Not because I was brave, but because I needed to know. Maybe I'd find footprints. Maybe there'd be some sign that it was just an ordinary person taking a walk. But when I mentioned this plan to my friends, they told me it wasn't worth the risk. "Just let it go," one of them said. "Probably nothing," another added. I wasn't sure if I believed them. Something about the whole thing felt off. But what could I do? Call the police? What would I even say? "Hey, I recorded a creepy guy in the woods, but he didn't actually do anything." That sounded ridiculous. In the end, I decided to do nothing. Just move on and forget about it. At least, that's what I told myself. but the uneasy feeling never really went away. For several days, I couldn't get that silhouette out of my head. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, but my imagination wouldn't let it go. Every time I walked past a window or turned a corner, I half expected to see someone watching me from the trees. I'd catch myself glancing over my shoulder in random places, feeling like I was being followed even in broad daylight. To put my mind at ease, I decided to go back to the same forest during the day when more people were around. It felt like the only way to prove to myself that there was nothing to be afraid of. The forest looked different in the daylight, less eerie, more alive. I walked almost the exact same route as before, my eyes flicking to every movement in the trees. Leaves rustled in the breeze, birds darted between branches, and distant voices echoed from other visitors. Nothing felt out of place. No gray figure lurking in the distance. I even took a few photos and short clips, trying to convince myself it was just another normal day. By the time I got home, I felt relieved. Whatever had happened that first day, it was probably nothing. I posted a few shots from my walk on Snapchat, captioning them casually. Not long after, my phone buzzed with a new message from an account I didn't recognize. Didn't see me this time? A cold wave of fear ran down my spine. Someone was watching my posts. Someone who had been there. My hands felt clammy as I stared at the message, my brain scrambling for an explanation. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe one of my friends was messing with me. But I knew, deep down, that wasn't the case. I deleted my recent posts immediately. I didn't want to give whoever this was any more information. I told myself not to react, not to show I was afraid. But that night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shadow slipping through the trees. Each day that passed, I kept telling myself I should report the account to Snapchat. But what would that really do? A blocked account wouldn't stop someone from following me in real life. Then, another message came. You shouldn't go there alone. I felt my chest tighten. My fingers hovered over my screen before I finally typed a reply. Who are you? The response came almost instantly. You already know. I put my phone down and stared at the screen, my pulse pounding in my ears. This wasn't just someone messing around. This was deliberate, personal. Whoever it was, they wanted me to know that they were still watching. I told a few friends, but their reactions were mixed. Some just shrugged it off. Others gave me that half-sympathetic, half-amused look, like I was letting my imagination get the best of me. Dude, it's probably just some troll, one of them said. But I knew it wasn't that simple. I started avoiding going out alone, especially near the forest. Even in my apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. I stopped posting anything related to my location, didn't check in anywhere, didn't share any outdoor pictures. If this person wanted my attention, I wasn't going to give it to them. But even though I tried to move on, I kept having the same dream. A silent forest, the empty path stretching ahead, and somewhere behind me, the gray figure, just out of sight. One night, I got home late, exhausted. I had almost started believing that things were going back to normal. Then, my phone lit up. A new notification. New video from an unknown user. My stomach dropped. My finger hovered over the screen before I finally pressed play. The video was shaky, the camera swinging slightly, pointed at the ground. A pair of feet moved through dirt and leaves. Then, the camera tilted upward, revealing familiar trees. Trees from that forest. My forest. The path looked exactly like the one I used to take. At the very end of the video, the camera shifted once more. A blurred hand lifted into the frame, making a slow, deliberate motion, almost like a wave, pointing toward the trail I always walked. an invitation, or a warning. My entire body went cold. I blocked the account immediately, changed my username, locked down my profile. I haven't been back to that forest since. It's been a long time now, but sometimes I still dream about it. I walk those quiet trails alone, the trees closing in around me. And just before I wake up, I always see it. The shadow in gray, moving just beyond my sight. None of my friends ever really believed me. Without proof, it was just another weird story, another eerie coincidence. But I know what I saw, and worse. I know that someone, somewhere, was watching me. And I have no idea why. I often recorded short videos for social media, especially car reviews. When my dad bought a used but well-maintained SUV, I decided to film it and show my friends. I stood in our yard, talking about the pros and cons of the new purchase, going over the details while my phone captured everything. While filming, I briefly noticed someone standing on the other side of the street. I didn't think much of it, just a passerby, maybe a neighbor. I kept talking, finished the recording, and uploaded it to Snapchat. About an hour later, a friend messaged me. "Hey, who's that in the background? Dude's just standing there staring." I frowned and replayed the video. There he was, a man, maybe in his 40s, standing still, his gaze locked in my direction. It wasn't a casual glance. He was staring, as if focused on me the whole time. I hadn't noticed it earlier, too busy talking to the camera. Still, I shrugged it off. Maybe he was just zoning out, or maybe he hadn't even been looking at me. I told myself it was nothing. That evening, I went outside to take out the trash. The air was cool, the streetlights casting long shadows over the sidewalk. As I walked toward the bins, I glanced toward my neighbor's house and felt my stomach clench. Someone was standing near their driveway. I couldn't see clearly in the dim light, but the shape, the posture, it looked like the same man from my video. I stood still for a second, then shook it off and tossed the trash in the bin. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe it wasn't even the same guy. Still, I walked back inside a little faster than usual, locking the door behind me. The next day, I woke up to a string of messages. Friends were joking about my mystery fan, saying I must have staged it to get more views. Some even sent edited screenshots of my video, circling the man in the background like some kind of horror movie frame. I laughed it off in the group chat, but something about it unsettled me. Throughout the day, I kept glancing outside, checking the street from the window. I didn't see him. Maybe he really was just some random guy passing by. But the thought kept nagging at me. Later, I posted a few everyday snaps. My lunch, a shot of my desk, nothing unusual. A little while after, I got a new notification, an anonymous message. "Neploa video. Your father must be proud?" I stared at the screen. Something about it felt off. It wasn't threatening, but it wasn't normal either. The phrasing was strange, almost deliberate. And how did they know it was my dad's car? I hadn't mentioned it in the video, just called it the new SUV. I replied, "Who is this?" No answer. That evening, I didn't go outside. A few days later, after dinner, I went outside to feed my cat, who liked to wander near the fence. The streetlight cast a dim, flickering glow, and as I bent down to place the food bowl, I noticed a figure standing just a few steps away. My stomach tightened. It was him. I straightened up, trying not to let my voice betray any nerves. "Hey!" I called out. The man hesitated, then took a small step back, as if unsure whether to stay or leave. Now that I saw him up close, something about his face seemed familiar. I couldn't place it immediately, but I had definitely seen him before. I took a step forward, keeping my voice steady. "Do you need something?" The man shifted uncomfortably before finally answering. "You probably don't remember me," he said. "We went to the same school." I frowned, searching my memory. He gave his name, and a vague recollection surfaced. We had never really talked, but I did remember him. Quiet, always sitting alone at the edge of the classroom, never quite fitting in with any group. He said he had recently moved into the neighborhood but wasn't sure how to approach me. That's why he had been hanging around, hoping to run into me naturally. Hearing this, I felt a mix of relief and awkwardness. For days, I had been convinced a dangerous stranger was following me. Instead, it was just someone from my past, trying, badly, to reconnect. We exchanged a few words about school, recalling a couple of mutual classmates. I asked why he hadn't just messaged me directly if he already had my contact on Snapchat. He looked down, shuffling his feet. "I don't know. I guess I was nervous. Back in school, no one really included me in anything. I didn't want to come off as weird." That made me pause. The whole situation had been bizarre, but hearing him admit it outright made him seem more awkward than threatening. He explained that after seeing my posts, he got curious about what I was up to, but didn't know how to reach out. "So, you just watched from a distance instead?" I asked. He exhaled sharply, looking embarrassed. "Yeah, I guess that sounds bad when you say it like that. I wasn't trying to be creepy, I swear." It was still weird, but I could tell he regretted it. I told him he should have just knocked on my door or sent a message instead of lurking around like a ghost. He nodded, mumbling an apology. He looked genuinely uncomfortable, like he hadn't expected things to escalate the way they did. After that night, we exchanged a few messages on Snapchat. He slowly opened up, and I started to see him as just a socially awkward guy, rather than some shadowy stalker. I even had to clarify to my friends that no, I wasn't being hunted by some lunatic, just an old classmate who had no idea how to start a normal conversation. That lingering unease never fully went away, though. For days, I had lived on edge, constantly watching my surroundings, convinced something bad was about to happen. It turned out his silent presence by the road wasn't a threat, just a hesitant attempt at connection. Still, I can't shake the memory of his stare from behind the fence. Maybe we'll actually get along now that he doesn't feel the need to hide. One thing's for sure. Snapchat, whether you realize it or not, can turn into a magnifying glass for people who don't even know what they're looking for. The dorm buildings on our campus stand directly across from each other, so some rooms have windows facing one another almost uncomfortably close. I never really paid much attention to it, though I'd often see people chatting across their balconies or waving at each other. It was just part of living here. One evening, while I was studying, I got a Snapchat notification. It was a photo of me, sitting at my desk, typing on my laptop. Nothing unusual, except for the angle. It was clearly taken from the window across from mine. At first, I thought it was just a prank from a friend or maybe my neighbor across the way messing around. I grabbed my phone and went straight to his room. I knocked a couple of times before he answered, looking genuinely confused when I asked if he'd sent the photo. He had no idea what I was talking about. He even swore that he had just gotten back from training and hadn't been in his room for hours. I wasn't entirely convinced, but I also didn't have any proof. Maybe someone else was messing with me, or maybe it was just some dumb joke. Either way, there wasn't much I could do about it at that moment. The next day, I got another message. same thing. Another picture from that same angle. But this time, it wasn't just a general shot of me working. It was a close-up of my face, taken right at the moment I had leaned back and yawned while reading. A chill ran through me. Someone wasn't just watching. They were watching closely. This time, I didn't hesitate. I went straight back to my neighbor's room, more forceful than before. When he opened the door, he had a slice of pizza in one hand, and there were two other guys inside with him. They all looked up at me like I was crazy when I started asking about the photos. I insisted on checking his window, even asked to see his phone. But his room looked completely normal. No cameras, no weird setup. Just the usual dorm clutter. I started to realize that if it wasn't him, then where the hell were these photos coming from? Wanting to get to the bottom of this, I started asking around on my floor. Some guys mentioned that the room directly across from mine was usually empty because the student who lived there had gone home for break. But apparently, his friends or acquaintances would sometimes go in and out without permission. That meant more than one person had access to that room, making it harder to pinpoint who was taking the photos. The thought hit me. Someone was deliberately coming to that empty room at night just to watch me. Paranoia crept in. I started paying more attention to that window. A few times when I suddenly looked over, I swore I saw the curtains shift slightly, like someone had just moved away from the opening. But before I could get a better look, the lights would go off. I never saw anyone inside. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched all the time. One night, while lying in bed, struggling to sleep, I heard voices in the hallway. It sounded like an argument. Curious, I got up and peeked outside. The dorm supervisor was talking to some guy I didn't recognize. He looked tense, fidgety. He kept insisting he needed to get onto our floor because his friend left his charger in a room. The supervisor wasn't buying it and told him to leave or security would be called. Something about the guy stuck with me. Was he the one who had been in that room? I wasn't taking chances. I immediately called a friend who lived on the floor above mine. His window had access to the fire escape, which led down to the windows of the dorm rooms below. I convinced him to help me check if the empty room's window was unlocked. We carefully climbed down, testing the window. It was locked. No signs of forced entry, no open gaps. At that moment, it seemed like a dead end. Whoever had been in there either had a key or was sneaking in some other way. The next day, I got another photo. This time, it wasn't just a casual snapshot. It was zoomed in, much closer than before, and it had been taken while I was changing after a shower. I felt my stomach drop. That was it. I went straight to campus administration. I showed them everything. The messages, the timestamps, the fact that an unknown guy had been trying to access my floor the night before. They didn't brush it off. A full check was done, and the locks on all unoccupied rooms were changed. And just like that, the photos stopped. Whoever had been watching me, whoever had been creeping in that room, just vanished. But the feeling didn't leave. Even weeks later, I kept my curtains shut tight. I double-checked my window locks every night. I couldn't shake the thought that someone, somewhere, had been watching me for God knows how long. And the worst part? I never found out who it was. New people move into our big student complex all the time. So when someone named Lena messaged me, introducing herself as a new resident and suggesting we meet at a nearby cafe, I wasn't surprised. It's always nice to meet a potential new neighbor, talk about classes, and share tips about dorm life. I checked her profile. The pictures were pretty standard. Her dorm room, textbooks, some student events. Nothing weird. She seemed normal, so I agreed to meet up. That day, I walked to the cafe feeling good, even excited. Helping someone settle in felt like a nice thing to do. There wasn't a single moment where I thought anything was off. It was just a casual meetup. I even planned to buy her coffee as a welcome gesture. When I stepped into the cafe, a few students were sitting around, but none of them looked like the girl from the profile picture. I figured she was running late and decided to wait, ordering myself a hot chocolate. I scrolled through my phone, glancing up every now and then, expecting to see a girl looking around for someone. After a few minutes, a man in his 40s approached my table. He was dressed plainly, jeans, a dark jacket, nothing that stood out. He stopped beside me and said, "You're Sophia, right?" With a wide smile, like he was trying hard to seem friendly. Something in my stomach twisted. I wasn't expecting this. He continued before I could answer. "Lena couldn't make it," he said, still smiling. "She asked me to bring you somewhere quieter so we can talk." I blinked, trying to process what he was saying. My first instinct was confusion. Who was this man? Why would Lena send someone else? "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice flat. He gestured toward the door. "She thought you'd prefer to chat somewhere without all this noise." I glanced around. The cafe wasn't even loud. My grip tightened around my cup. Something felt wrong. Then he added, like it was no big deal, "I can give you a ride. My car's just outside." A cold fear gripped me. The way he spoke, the way he stood there without hesitation. It was clear this wasn't some simple mix-up. He had come here for me, fully expecting I'd follow him. I forced a smile, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why don't we wait for Lena together?" His expression didn't change. "There's no need," he said. "She already decided. She told me you should trust me." My stomach churned. No one talks like that. Not in normal situations. It hit me then. Someone had deliberately tricked me into coming here. He took a step closer. "Come on. We should go now." My body tensed. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. I needed to get out of this situation. Fast. I glanced at my phone on the table. "I just need to make a quick call," I said, standing up. My voice was light, casual. I moved away from the table, heading toward the bar. He followed. I unlocked my phone and put it to my ear, pretending to call someone. But then I did something else. I turned my head slightly, making it obvious I was looking for help. He saw it. The moment he realized what I was doing, his face changed. His forced smile faded. His body stiffened for just a second, and then, without another word, he turned and walked out of the cafe. I didn't move. I just stood there, phone pressed to my ear, watching him disappear through the door. My hands were shaking. As soon as I could breathe again, I reported everything to the dorm security team. The guys at the front desk were stunned. This wasn't just some creep lurking around campus. Someone was making fake accounts to lure students out. I gave them the username of Lena. They immediately started checking for other suspicious profiles. If this had happened to me, it could have happened to others. And it had. A few other girls had also received strange messages from new students who wanted to meet up. Some ignored them. Some had planned to go, but changed their minds last minute. I sat there listening as security sent out a campus-wide alert. The reality of what could have happened finally sank in. They searched for the man on security footage, but he was careful. Too careful. He never looked directly at cameras, never lingered in one place long enough to leave a clear image. It was obvious he had done this before. There wasn't enough evidence to track him down, but the campus warning system had been triggered. Security tightened. People became more cautious. And just like that, he vanished. I took time to process everything. The fear faded. but for weeks I flinched whenever I got a message from someone I didn't know. Looking back, I realized how close I had been to real danger. But I also knew that speaking up had likely saved others from walking into the same trap. It took a while, but I eventually stopped jumping at every notification. Life went back to normal. Almost. One thing never changed. I never let my guard down again. I wasn't the most social person before, but I figured a fresh start was a good excuse to change that. One evening, I got an invite to a party. "Come over, it'll be fun. Here's the address. Don't get lost." The sender was some guy who claimed he had seen me at a few gatherings with mutual friends. I didn't recognize the name, but the message felt casual enough. I hesitated for a moment, then shrugged it off. I wanted to meet new people, and this was a perfect chance. I grabbed my jacket, got into my old sedan, and punched the address into my GPS. The place turned out to be in a quiet suburban area, where houses were spaced far apart. Most of them looked well-maintained, with trimmed lawns and glowing porch lights. But when I pulled up to the given address, it was a completely different story. The house looked abandoned. The porch was falling apart, and the front steps were boarded up. The windows were grimy, the yard overgrown. It stood out in the otherwise neat neighborhood. I checked the address again. Maybe I had entered it wrong. But just as I was about to drive away, another message popped up on Snapchat. "Come on in, we're in the living room." Something felt off. There were no signs of a party, no music, no cars parked outside, nothing. My gut told me to turn around, but curiosity made me pause. Maybe the party was in the back, or maybe the inside was better than the outside. I got out of my car and slowly approached the house. I rang the doorbell. No response. I knocked. Still nothing. The whole street was eerily silent, with only the faint hum of distant traffic. I stepped back, debating whether to leave, when I noticed something strange. A broken window to the left of the porch. The glass was shattered, but what really caught my attention were the footprints in the dust on the windowsill. Someone had climbed in recently. That creeping feeling in my stomach grew stronger. My fingers hovered over my phone, debating whether I should just go. Instead, I typed a message. "Hey, I'm here. Where is everyone?" The reply came almost instantly. "We're inside. Use the side door." I looked at the house again. The front door was locked. The windows were dark. There was no movement inside. Every instinct told me to leave, but another thought held me there. What if it really was a party, and I was just overthinking? I didn't want to be the guy who chickened out just because a house looked creepy. The sun had almost fully set now, and the single porch light above the door wasn't working. The yard felt bigger in the dimming light, the silence around me heavier. I took a deep breath, exhaled, and turned toward the side of the house. I steadied myself and stepped around the corner of the house. Sure enough, there was a side door, slightly open, just a few centimeters, like someone had left it that way on purpose. Inside, something rustled. It wasn't loud, but it was distinct. The sound of movement, maybe someone shifting on broken glass or stepping on dry twigs. My fingers tensed. Then my phone vibrated. Another message. I looked down, and my stomach dropped. It was a photo. A picture of the side window, taken from outside. Right where I was standing. My breath caught. Someone was watching me, right now. I spun around, scanning the yard, the trees, the shadows stretching in the dim light. There was no one. The street was still empty. The silence felt heavier, pressing down on me. My brain screamed at me to leave, but I hesitated. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe I was overreacting. Some part of me clung to the idea that this was still a normal party invite, just with a messed up sense of humor. Then, movement. The crack in the door. Something appeared for a split second. An eye, just one. It peered out at me from the darkness inside. And then, in an instant, it was gone. That was it. That was the line. I bolted. I ran full speed back to my car, every nerve in my body screaming to move, move, move. My keys were already in my hand. I fumbled, nearly dropping them, yanked open the door, and collapsed into the driver's seat. My hands shook as I jammed the key into the ignition. The engine hesitated, choking for a moment before finally turning over. As I threw the car into reverse, my eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. Someone stood on the porch, a tall, unmoving figure. Just standing there, watching. I didn't wait to see more. I slammed the gas, sped backward onto the street, and didn't stop. My heart was hammering all the way back to my apartment. Every time I glanced at my mirrors, I half expected to see headlights behind me, following. Once, I thought I did. A dark car, a few blocks back. But when I turned off the main road, it was gone. Back in my room, I locked the door, sat on my bed, and just breathed. I didn't tell anyone. Not right away. It felt too insane to say out loud. Who sends a fake party invite just to lure someone to an abandoned house? What was supposed to happen if I actually went inside? It wasn't until a couple of days later that I finally mentioned the house to someone, a classmate. Just casually, like I was asking about a random building. His face changed immediately. That place? Dude, no one lives there. It's been empty for months. Something happened there, man. Some real bad shit. He didn't know details, just that people stayed away, that the place had a history. I blocked the Snapchat account that sent me the invite. It felt pointless. Whoever they were, they could always make a new one. But it wasn't just about that anymore. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched, that I had been marked somehow, like I had stepped too close to something I wasn't supposed to see. I started keeping to myself. No more parties, no more social media check-ins. I turned off location sharing on every app I had. But at night, I would still wake up, heart pounding, remembering that one eye watching me from the crack in the door. And sometimes, when I checked my phone, I would feel the familiar jolt of panic at every new notification. Because deep down, I was terrified that one day, I'd open Snapchat and see another picture of myself. I always considered myself a sociable guy. I run a student blog, love showing campus life from the inside. People often messaged me with questions about faculties, clubs, and events. One day, I started receiving strange photos. They were of me, sitting in the library, eating in the cafeteria, walking near the main building. At first, I thought it was a joke from my friends. We had a few pranksters in our group who loved messing around. But when I asked them, they all looked genuinely confused and denied any involvement. I decided to ignore the pictures, assuming whoever was sending them would get bored. But they kept coming. And each time, they were taken from a closer distance. It was as if the person behind the camera was getting nearer, inching towards me. Every time I opened a new photo, my stomach tightened at the thought that someone was standing right next to me, taking pictures, and I didn't even notice. The angles were unsettling too. Some shots caught my face in a way that made it clear they were waiting for just the right moment, like when I was distracted or looking away. I started feeling uneasy in places that used to feel safe. The library, where I spent hours studying, suddenly felt oppressive. I couldn't focus, always glancing around to see if someone was watching. I started leaving lectures with groups, never wanting to be the last one out of the room. My friends noticed the change. They asked what was going on, why I seemed so on edge. I told them I was just tired, stressed with assignments. But in my head, I kept running through possibilities. Was this a weird secret admirer? A joke taken too far? Maybe an old classmate messing with me? Then, the messages changed. Instead of just photos, there were captions. "You looked good today. I like your sweater." It didn't feel like a joke anymore. It felt like someone had crossed a line. I decided to message the anonymous sender and demand an explanation. The reply came quickly. "Aren't you happy that I'm paying attention to you?" A chill ran through me. I had never given anyone a reason to do this. This wasn't normal. I gathered all the screenshots I had and went straight to the university security office. They listened, looked at the messages, and advised me not to respond anymore. They also gave me a contact for a counselor in case the stress got too much. I left their office feeling determined. I wasn't going to just sit back and let this continue. I told my friends everything. We came up with a plan. If I got another picture, they would try to spot the person taking it. We also agreed to keep our phones close so I could call if I ever felt like I was being followed in real time. The next day, I sat in the cafeteria where I could see almost the entire room. I deliberately chose a seat with my back against the wall. I wanted to see who was watching me. Not even 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Another photo. This time, it was taken from behind. I spun around instantly, scanning the room, but all I saw were students talking, drinking coffee, minding their own business. No one looked out of place. My friends got up, pretending to grab food, and discreetly checked the area. Nothing. No one suspicious. And yet, we all knew. The person had to be close. I was starting to feel like I was trapped in some cheap thriller, and it was exhausting. That night, another message arrived. "I don't like that you brought others into our secret." Whoever it was, they were watching more closely than I realized. They knew I wasn't alone. The next morning, I was called to the dean's office. University security had found something. It turned out the person behind this had been someone I barely remembered. A girl I had worked on a project with once. We had exchanged a few messages about assignments, nothing more. But somehow, she convinced herself that I felt something for her too. Wanting to be close to me, she started following me, taking secret pictures, watching. The university had already spoken to her. Her parents had been called in. She admitted to everything and promised to stop. I felt a weird mix of fear and relief. It was over. There was no violence, no big confrontation. Just a quiet, unsettling truth. All this time, someone had been following me, twisting reality in their own mind. In the end, I realized I had to be more careful. Being open online meant people could see more than I intended. And you never really know who's watching or what they're thinking. I love going to the movies with friends, especially in the evening when I can finally relax after classes. That day, we planned to watch a big premiere, one of those movies everyone on social media had been talking about for a week. The theater was packed, people whispering excitedly as they settled into their seats. We found ours near the middle, a perfect view of the screen. The lights dimmed, the previews rolled, and soon, the movie started. About halfway through, my bag vibrated. I usually don't check my phone in the theater, but for some reason, I pulled it out. There was a new message. No text, just a photo. It took me a second to realize what I was looking at. It was me, sitting right there, in that very moment, my face illuminated by the glow of the screen. The angle of the shot was slightly above and behind me. Someone had taken this from just a few rows back. I frowned and turned slightly, trying to see if any of my friends were messing with me. But they were all focused on the film. The ones next to me didn't even have their phones out. I glanced further back, but in the dim light I couldn't make out much. No one seemed to be pointing a camera in my direction. It had to be one of my friends, right? A harmless joke. I leaned toward my closest friend and whispered, "Very funny." She gave me a confused look. "What?" I showed her my phone. She squinted at the screen, then turned to look behind us. "That's weird." I checked the sender. No name, just a number I didn't recognize. My stomach tightened a little, but I tried to shake it off. Maybe someone in the row behind us was messing around. Maybe it was some dumb prank. I locked my phone and tried to refocus on the movie, but I couldn't. My eyes kept flicking toward the dark rows behind me. My body felt stiff, every sound making me flinch slightly. The theater, which had felt cozy and exciting minutes ago, now seemed too dark, too full of people I couldn't see clearly. The movie kept playing, and I forced myself to watch. The minutes stretched on. I was probably overreacting. It was just a stupid photo. Then my phone buzzed again. I hesitated before looking. My fingers felt clumsy as I unlocked the screen. Another photo. This time, it was a close-up of my face. The angle was lower, like the person had leaned forward to capture it. My face was slightly turned, eyes focused on the screen. Underneath, a short message. "Good movie, right?" A cold pressure settled in my chest. I gripped my phone tightly, trying to steady my breathing. I turned my head, scanning the rows behind me. But it was useless. The darkness swallowed everything. No one had their phone screen lit. I wanted to stand up, to walk out, but that felt stupid. What would I even say? That someone took a couple of pictures of me? That wasn't illegal. It wasn't even really threatening. But it felt wrong. I swallowed hard and tried to shrink into my seat, suddenly hyper-aware of how visible I was. Even in a full theater, even with my friends on both sides, I had never felt more exposed. When the movie ended, I didn't rush to leave. Instead, I lingered, watching the people heading for the exits. My heart pounded as I scanned every face, trying to spot someone who looked guilty. But how could I tell? It wasn't like I had a clear suspect. Still, there was a feeling, like I was trying to catch someone in the act, even though I didn't know who they were. The theater was nearly empty when I saw him, a guy near the exit. He glanced at me just for a second, then turned away quickly and started moving faster, almost running. I didn't think, I just reacted. "Hey, I think that's him," I called to my friends. Their heads snapped up, following my gaze, and we took off after him. But the hallway outside was packed with people leaving other screens, a mess of bodies moving in different directions. He slipped through the crowd, and in seconds, he was gone. I stopped, catching my breath, frustration twisting in my chest. He was right there, so close. But now, nothing. I pulled out my phone and showed my friends the screenshots. They stared at them, but it didn't help. The pictures didn't show anything except me, sitting in my seat. No hints, no context. Just proof that someone had been watching. One of my friends hesitated. "Maybe we should call the police." The suggestion made my stomach tighten, but she was right. What if he was still out there? What if he followed me outside? I didn't want to go home without doing something. We left the theater together and made the call. The officers listened carefully, looking at the photos on my phone. They nodded, asked a few questions, but their response was cautious. "There's not much to go on," one of them said. "A crowded theater, lots of people, Hard to say who took these. I tried to describe the guy I'd seen. Dark t-shirt, a baseball cap, average height. But it had only been a few seconds. The details were already slipping. They took notes, then told me if anything else happened, I should call them immediately. They also said they'd request security footage from the theater, see if they could spot anything in the hallways. That was something at least. But I left the station with an uneasy feeling. Even if they found him on the cameras, would it matter? He hadn't broken any laws, just taken some photos. The next few days felt strange. I was on edge, constantly checking my phone, jumping at every vibration. But nothing happened. No messages, no photos, nothing. It was like it had never happened at all. Eventually, the fear dulled, but something had changed. I stopped going to the movies at night. Even when my friends invited me, I made excuses. The idea of sitting in the dark, surrounded by strangers, no way of knowing who was behind me, made my skin crawl. Weeks passed, then months, and the police never followed up. No new information, no answers, just silence. No one ever admitted to the prank. No one confessed to messing with me. And I had no enemies, no reason for anyone to target me. At first, I half hoped he would appear again, just to know why, just to understand what he wanted. But he didn't. And over time, the fear faded into the background. Life moved on. Still, every time I sit in a theater now, I feel it. That slight unease, that awareness of the people behind me. Because the truth is, you never really know who's watching. It was already dark when I finally packed up my things and left the building. The parking lot was almost empty, just a few scattered cars under the dim yellow lights. I was walking toward my car when my phone buzzed. A Snapchat notification. I swiped it open without thinking, and my stomach dropped. It was a photo of my car, taken from the side. The angle suggested whoever took it was standing somewhere nearby. The image was dark, grainy, but it was definitely my car. My old compact with a dented door. Underneath the photo, a short caption. "Don't forget to check the back seat." I stopped walking. My eyes scanned the parking lot, searching for movement, for a figure, for anyone who might have taken the picture. The lot stretched out, mostly empty except for a few cars parked farther away. The street beyond was quiet. I looked at the message again. My first thought was that it had to be a joke. Someone messing with me. A lot of people knew my car. Maybe a classmate saw me leave, thought it'd be funny to freak me out. But something about it felt wrong. A prank would usually come with laughing emojis or a follow-up message. This was just the photo and those words. I turned back toward the building, my pulse picking up. The safest option was to go back inside. I wasn't going to walk up to my car alone after that. Inside, the hallways were mostly empty. A few students lingered near the vending machines, but I headed straight for the front desk, where I knew a security guard usually sat. I'd seen him before, an older guy with a tired look, always making his rounds at night. He wasn't at the desk, but after a moment, I spotted him down the hall. "Hey," I called out, my voice lower than I intended. He turned, raising an eyebrow. I hesitated before holding up my phone. "I just got this message. It's my car." He stepped closer, looking at the screen. His expression didn't change much, but he nodded after a second. "Where's your car?" "Parking lot out back," I said. "Near the lamppost, kind of by itself." He glanced toward the entrance, then back at me. "You want me to walk with you?" I exhaled, only realizing then how tight my chest felt. "Yeah, please." We walked together through the building, and I felt a little better with someone beside me. But the closer we got to the doors, the worse the fear crept back in. "What do you think it is?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay even. "A joke?" The guard shrugged. "Could be. People do stupid things. But it's good you didn't go alone." Outside, the air was colder than before. The parking lot stretched out in front of us, silent, the rows of cars still and shadowed. My car sat exactly where I left it, looking no different. Except now, it felt different. The guard pulled out a flashlight, clicking it on. "Stay here," he said. Then he started walking toward my car, the beam of light cutting across the pavement. The guard moved the flashlight across the windows, checking inside. The car was empty. Still, my skin crawled when I looked at the back seat, as if expecting to see something lurking there. "Nothing inside," the guard said, then stepped back. "Let's check around it." I followed him as he circled the car, scanning the ground, the undercarriage, even glancing at the wheel wells. The flashlight beam flickered across the pavement, illuminating small bits of gravel, dried leaves, but nothing unusual. "Pop the trunk," he said. I hesitated, then unlocked it. He lifted it open and shined the light inside. My backpack, a half-empty water bottle, a couple of books. Nothing else. "Looks clean," he said, closing it. Maybe it really was a prank. Someone who knew my car, knew I'd be alone at night, and just wanted to scare me. But standing there in the dark, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us. The nearest building was mostly dark, only a few windows lit. The street beyond was empty. Still, the feeling stayed. The guard seemed to notice my unease. "Go home," he said. "If anything happens again, call security or the admin office. Don't come out alone." I nodded, gripping my keys tighter. "Thanks." He waited until I got in, watching as I locked the doors. As soon as I turned the key in the ignition, the engine rumbled to life, the sound almost too loud in the quiet lot. The guard stepped back, giving me space. I forced myself to breathe. Nothing had happened. Just a weird message. Nothing was there. Still, my hands were tense on the wheel as I pulled out of the lot. Halfway home, I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. A car had pulled onto the road behind me, keeping a steady distance. I told myself it was nothing, just another driver going the same way. But every turn I made, it followed. I tested it, switching lanes, slowing down slightly. The car stayed with me. My pulse picked up. It could still be a coincidence. I turned again, onto a quieter street. The headlights followed. I swallowed hard. Maybe I was overreacting, but I wasn't about to take any chances. At the next light, I turned onto a busier road, heading toward a gas station with bright lights and people around. The car stayed behind me for another block, then suddenly turned off onto a side street. I exhaled, my hands sore from gripping the wheel. Probably nothing. Probably just paranoia. But when I glanced at my rearview mirror again, I felt that same creeping fear. I knew the back seat was empty. I had checked. The guard had checked. But the whole drive home, I couldn't stop glancing at it, half expecting something, someone, to be there. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, my chest was tight, and my head was buzzing with exhaustion. I locked the car the second I stepped out, rushed inside, bolted the door. I didn't even turn on the lights before grabbing my phone and calling my parents. I didn't tell them everything, just enough. That someone had sent a weird message, that I got nervous driving home. I just needed to hear their voices, something normal, something grounding. That night, I barely slept. My dreams were restless, full of empty parking lots, shadowed figures just out of sight, a phone screen lighting up with an unknown message. The next day, I made sure I didn't stay late. I parked closer to the main entrance. I told a few friends what happened. Some laughed it off, saying it was just a stupid joke. Others looked more concerned. "Be careful," one of them said. "People are weird." I started checking the back seat every time I got into my car, just in case. Weeks passed. No more messages, no more photos. At first, I stayed on edge, expecting something else to happen. But slowly, I started relaxing again. Maybe it really had been a one-time thing, some idiot thinking it was funny. Still, I couldn't help but wonder, who had taken that picture? Some people said it could have been one of the campus pranksters, just testing how people would react. Others thought it was something worse, that maybe someone had been watching me, planning something, but for whatever reason, decided to back off. I never got an answer. But I stopped parking in the far lot after dark, and I never forgot to check the back seat again. I had been running a small blog for a while, posting videos about everyday life, motivation, study tips, and little life hacks. My audience was modest but supportive, and I was used to receiving kind comments. When this fan first messaged me, I didn't think much of it. He complimented my posts, thanked me for the inspiration. It seemed harmless. Over time, though, the messages became more frequent. Then came the photos. Random pictures of me walking down the street, sitting in a cafe, waiting for a bus. It made me uneasy. I never gave him permission to take photos of me in real life. I replied, keeping it polite but firm. "Please don't take pictures of me without my knowledge." He didn't respond. For a couple of days, I thought maybe that was the end of it. But then, another photo arrived. This time, I was at university with my friends. With every new photo, the sense of violation grew. He wasn't just following my content online. He was tracking me in real life, capturing every movement. I messaged him again, trying to be direct but not aggressive. "Please stop. This is making me uncomfortable." His reply came quickly. "I just want to be closer to you. Is that so wrong?" That was when the feeling of safety disappeared. I started glancing over my shoulder on the street, sticking to crowded places, avoiding walking alone. Then his tone shifted. The admiration turned into frustration. He accused me of being cold, of ignoring someone who cared about me. "You act like I'm some kind of creep," one message read. "You should be grateful someone cares this much." The fear became constant. He hadn't touched me, hadn't threatened me directly, but the words in the photos felt like a warning. Friends told me to go to the police. I hesitated. Would they even take it seriously? One evening, I received a photo of my apartment building. The message that came with it read, "See you soon." That was the final straw. This wasn't just uncomfortable anymore. It was a real threat. My hands were shaking as I called the police. I explained everything, sent them screenshots of the messages and photos. They listened, but their advice was frustratingly basic. Be cautious, change my routes when walking home, and never open the door if I wasn't expecting visitors. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every noise in the stairwell made my heart jump. A footstep, a door closing, the faint creak of the elevator. I kept expecting a knock, a shadow under my door, a voice calling my name. Morning came, and I forced myself to go to class. I stuck close to my friends, checking my phone every few minutes, afraid of what I might see next. That afternoon, when I got home, I saw it immediately. A smear of green paint streaked across my apartment door. My stomach dropped. Someone had been here. He had been here. I knocked on my neighbor's door, asking if they had seen anything. They shrugged. No, they hadn't heard anything unusual. Maybe someone came by when they weren't in the hallway. My legs felt weak. This wasn't just messages or photos anymore. This was real, physical evidence that he was escalating. I called the police again. This time, they sent an officer to take a statement. I filed a report, but I could tell they weren't hopeful about finding him. No cameras in the building, no real witnesses, just a streak of paint and my fear. I packed a bag and went to stay with friends for a few nights. Sleeping alone in that apartment wasn't an option anymore. I barely spoke. My brain kept running in circles. Why was he doing this? What did he actually want? And the worst thought of all, was this just the beginning? And then, nothing. No more messages. No more pictures. No more signs that he was watching. It was as if he had vanished. Just as suddenly as he had appeared, he was gone. Days passed, then weeks. The police never found him, though they kept my report on file. They told me to call if anything else happened. I never really felt safe again. Even now, I don't post as much online. I locked down my old content, filtered comments, made everything as private as possible. But the paranoia never fully left. The feeling that someone could be watching, waiting, just out of sight. He may have disappeared, but the fear he left behind stayed with me. My name is Kate, and I'm going to tell you what happened to my friend Jake when he got caught in a nightmare because of one unlucky Snapchat connection. We were in college together and often went to parties where Jake had plenty of chances to meet new people. At one of those parties, he struck up a conversation with a girl who introduced herself as Miranda. She was pretty, friendly, and seemed genuinely interested in talking to him. They exchanged contacts and started chatting afterward. From the outside, it looked like a normal, casual friendship forming. Nothing unusual. A few days later, out of nowhere, she messaged him saying she needed urgent help. She claimed she wasn't feeling well and asked Jake to come to a house on the outskirts of town. She said she didn't know anyone else nearby and felt too weak to go out herself. Jake was a good guy. He wasn't stupid, but he had a soft spot for helping people. He didn't question the situation too much. He just grabbed his car keys and got ready to go. I saw him that evening before he left. He was relaxed, maybe even a little excited. He joked about how maybe this was some kind of test, like she wanted to see if he was really the kind of guy who'd show up for a friend. He told me he'd be back soon. I didn't think much of it at the time. At first, he assumed Miranda was just embarrassed to ask for help from a stranger. But if she had reached out to him specifically, that meant she trusted him, maybe even liked him. He saw it as a chance to prove himself as a reliable friend. On the way there, he texted me, "Send me the hospital address just in case. If she gets worse, I might need it." I was a little busy at the time, so I didn't give it much thought. I sent him the address and went back to what I was doing. 2 hours passed. No messages from Jake. That was weird. Usually he was quick to reply, even just a short text saying everything was fine. I figured maybe he got caught up helping her, but as it got later into the night, I started feeling uneasy. Jake wasn't the type to just disappear without a word. I called him. The phone was out of service. The next morning, I got a message from an unknown number. Just 2 words. "Help me." My stomach dropped. My mind started racing, trying to figure out where he could be. I texted back immediately, but there was no response. Minutes passed, like hours. Then, finally, another message. "I'm at the hospital." I had no idea what condition he was in, but I didn't waste a second. I grabbed my things and rushed there as fast as I could. When I arrived, I found him lying in a hospital bed, covered in bruises, barely able to move. His right arm was in a heavy cast, his face swollen and cut up. The doctor said he was brought in by a stranger who found him near the road, unconscious. No one knew who the person was, just that they had called an ambulance and left before giving any details. I wanted to call the police right then and there. I wanted answers. But Jake couldn't talk. He was too weak, and when he tried, his voice barely came out. Instead, he kept motioning toward the table next to his bed, where his phone was supposed to be. He struggled to get words out, but I caught one. Snapchat. When he finally had the strength to communicate, Jake took a piece of paper and wrote down what happened. When he arrived at the address Miranda had given him, the place looked run down. Just a dark, quiet house on an empty street. But he knocked anyway. A guy opened the door. Then another one appeared behind him. Both were around his age, but something felt off. "Miranda's in the back," one of them said. Jake hesitated but didn't want to be rude. He followed them through the yard, past the house, toward what looked like a shed or garage. Then, before he could react, one of them grabbed him by the jacket and shoved him to the ground. They started demanding money, accusing him of some kind of debt. He had no idea what they were talking about. He tried to explain that they had the wrong person, but they didn't care. They kept shouting at him, hitting him. At some point, one of them stomped on his hand, which explained the broken arm. He wasn't sure how long it lasted. He just remembered pain, shouting, and then nothing. When he woke up, he was lying near the road, barely conscious. His phone was gone. His wallet was gone. Someone must have dumped him there, either thinking he was dead or just wanting to get rid of him. Whoever found him must have called for help, but Jake never saw their face. The police took his statement, but there wasn't much they could do. The Snapchat account, gone. The address, fake. Any trace of Miranda or the guys, non-existent. Tracking them down was nearly impossible. Jake spent weeks recovering. The concussion, the broken ribs, the cast. Those were just the physical wounds. He stopped using social media completely after that. He didn't want to take the risk again. As for me, I still can't shake the guilt. Maybe if I had realized sooner that something was off, I could have warned him. Maybe he wouldn't have gone alone. In the end, no one paid for what happened. Jake was left with scars and trauma, and the people who did it to him just disappeared. Now, every time I hear about someone meeting a stranger online, I can't help but warn them. Because no matter how normal it seems, you never really know who's on the other side of the screen. I never thought my obsession with Snapchat could put me on the edge of disappearing. It all started after a rough breakup. I threw myself into social apps, just trying to distract myself. One night, I got a friend request from someone named BabyDoll94. Her profile was cute. Blonde, pretty, lots of selfies by the pool. Nothing suspicious. We started chatting. She was friendly, easy to talk to. She'd joke around, send random pictures, sometimes of her coffee, sometimes just her feet dangling off a lounge chair. Every now and then, she'd mention how lonely she was. Not in a dramatic way, just little comments like, "Nights are always the worst when you're alone." At first, I didn't think much of it. But after weeks of feeling like I was drifting after my breakup, her attention felt good. It was nice to be wanted. We talked every day. She'd ask about my job, what music I liked, my favorite places to eat. I started looking forward to her messages. It felt like something real. Eventually, our conversations got more personal. She told me she wasn't really into the dating apps, that she preferred meeting people in a more natural way. I laughed, pointing out that Snapchat wasn't exactly traditional. She just sent back a winking emoji. Then, one evening, she said she lived close by. That caught my attention. She mentioned a neighborhood about 15 minutes from mine, saying she had just moved in. She told me how she didn't really know anyone yet, how she'd love to hang out sometime. It seemed casual, natural. I started picturing her as some girl from a nearby college, maybe just trying to make new friends. A couple of days later, she sent a message. "Come over tonight. Just us." She dropped an address, adding, "I'm alone." I hesitated, but only for a second. She'd been sending me pictures for weeks. Nothing about her seemed fake, and I was tired of just talking. I wanted to see her in person. I grabbed my keys and headed out. I drove my old car through empty streets, the ride taking about 15 minutes. The neighborhood was quiet, too quiet. The houses looked old, worn down, and the streetlights barely lit the cracked pavement. As I pulled up to the address, my stomach tightened. The house in front of me wasn't what I expected. The fence was rusted and crooked, the paint on the walls peeling. The windows were covered, thick curtains blocking any view inside. It looked abandoned. She said she had a cozy room, a nice living space. This doesn't match. I sat in my car for a moment, hesitating. Then I pulled out my phone and texted, "I'm here." No reply. A minute passed, then another. My fingers hovered over the screen, debating whether I should just leave. Then a Snapchat notification popped up. It was a picture. My breath caught in my throat. It was the same house. But the photo was taken from behind me. And in the image, I was standing on the porch. There was someone in the doorway. I spun around, my heart slamming against my ribs. Nothing. Just the dark, empty porch. A sudden impact struck the side of my head. The world tilted, my vision swimming as I collapsed to my knees. My ears rang. Footsteps pounded toward me. "Grab him!" Someone's hands yanked at my arms. I tried to fight back, twisting, but my body felt heavy. Everything was spinning. Voices murmured, but they sounded distant. "He's not the guy." "What do you mean?" "He came." A curse. Someone's grip on my arm tightened. My legs gave out. The darkness swallowed me whole. I don't know how long I was out. When I came to, I wasn't in the same place. My body ached, my head pounding. The floor beneath me was cold and rough, maybe concrete. My wrists burned. Tied? My mouth was dry. Footsteps again. Voices, but muffled. Wrong one. "We dump him," or... The rest blurred together. A sharp pain in my side. The sensation of being dragged. Then nothing. My phone was found later, tossed in a dumpster miles away. That's how the police linked it back to me. But by then, I was already gone. I'm still listed as missing. My friends keep searching. My family hasn't stopped hoping. Some have pieced together that this wasn't random. People have gone missing in that area before, lured by fake profiles and false promises. No one knows what happens to them. Maybe I'm still out there. Maybe I'm not. All I know is, I was just looking for a distraction, and it cost me everything. I always felt comfortable in my relationship with my boyfriend. We trusted each other completely, and sending personal photos was never something I worried about. Snapchat automatically deleted them, so there was no risk of them being saved or shared. That's why, when I got the notification late at night, "Your photo has been saved," my stomach dropped. My boyfriend never took screenshots without asking. We had talked about it before, and he had no reason to lie. I immediately texted him asking if he had saved anything. His response came almost instantly. I didn't. I swear. I stared at my phone, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was a glitch? A bug? I wanted to believe that, so I forced myself to put the phone down and go to sleep. I'd figure it out in the morning. The next day, I had almost convinced myself that I was overreacting. Maybe Snapchat messed up. Maybe my boyfriend had accidentally tapped something. But then, around noon, a new message appeared from an account I didn't recognize. No name, no profile picture, just a single line. I have everything. I felt sick. My hands shook as I tapped on the message. A few seconds later, more texts came in. Images. My images. The ones I had sent privately. The ones that were supposed to disappear. Then, the final message. Do what I say, or everyone will see them. I sat frozen, my mind struggling to catch up. Someone had my pictures. Someone I didn't know. And they weren't just threatening me. They were watching me. That's what made it worse. The way they worded it. I have everything. Not just my pictures, but my secrets. I had no idea how this was possible. Snapchat deleted everything. It wasn't supposed to be saved. Could someone have hacked me? Intercepted the files? Or had they been watching in real time, taking screenshots as I sent them? I had to talk to my boyfriend. I called him immediately. He picked up on the first ring. What's wrong? I didn't even bother with small talk. Did anyone hack your account? What? No. Why? I explained everything in a rushed, breathless panic. The notification, the messages, the photos. He was just as confused as I was. I swear, I didn't save anything, and no one else has my login. That left me with nothing, no explanation, no idea who was behind this. Then another message came in. Pay up or they go public. A demand. A price for my silence. I didn't even know how much they wanted, but that wasn't the point. I had never been blackmailed before. I didn't know what to do. My mind kept jumping between options. Go to my parents, call the police. But I felt trapped. The thought of someone seeing those pictures, spreading them around, I couldn't handle it. Instead of reaching out for help, I made a choice. I was going to handle this myself. Not long after the threat started, my photos began appearing online. At first, it was in private group chats, ones I wasn't a part of until someone made sure I saw. They added me, sent the screenshots, then kicked me out. I blocked the accounts, turned off notifications, but it didn't matter. The images spread. Different accounts sent them, different names, but always the same message. Look how far this can go. Then, people at my campus started whispering. I could feel it. Conversations would stop when I walked by. A few brave ones sent me direct messages, pretending to be concerned, but really, they just wanted to see my reaction. At night, I cried into my pillow, too scared to leave my room. My phone was a constant source of dread. Every time it lit up, I wondered if it was another message, another threat, another account pushing the humiliation further. Friends told me to get help, go to someone who could stop it. But I was too ashamed. Too scared to admit that I had made the mistake of trusting someone with those photos. I kept telling myself, if I ignore it, maybe it will go away. Then, another message from the anonymous account. It's too late now. I can do whatever I want with your reputation. I stopped going to lectures. I didn't answer calls. My world shrank down to my dorm room, where I sat in silence, waiting for things to get worse. And they did. One night, I heard a sound outside my door. A soft thud, like something had been tossed against it. I hesitated before opening it, heart pounding. On the floor was a package. No name, no return address. My stomach twisted as I picked it up and carried it inside. When I opened it, my breath caught in my throat. Inside were printed copies of my photos, covered in obscene, degrading words, scrawled in marker. Someone had done this by hand. Someone who knew where I lived. I dropped the papers like they were burning my skin. This wasn't just online anymore. Someone had taken the time to find me. Someone was watching me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I felt like I was drowning, and I just couldn't do it anymore. Without thinking, without planning, I grabbed a bottle of painkillers from my desk. Hands shaking, I twisted the cap off and swallowed as many as I could, just wanting everything to stop. I don't remember what happened after that. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, an IV in my arm, my head pounding, my throat dry. My roommate had found me in time, called an ambulance, saved me. But I wasn't relieved. I just felt empty. I had made everything worse. When the truth came out, the police got involved. They tried to trace the source of the leaks, but it was almost impossible. The blackmailer's account was deleted, and whoever was behind it had covered their tracks well. I went through months of therapy, trying to rebuild myself, trying to move forward. But some things you can't take back. I know those pictures are still out there. Somewhere. In someone's cloud storage, on some hard drive. They'll never truly disappear. And no matter how much time passes, I'll never forget the feeling of losing control over my own life. I'm still here. I survived. I'm slowly putting myself back together. But I don't think I'll ever trust the internet, or people, the same way again. I was in college, and after exams, we decided to have a small party at a club nearby. It was nothing crazy, just a way to unwind after the stress. I stayed out later than I planned, and finally drove home sometime past midnight. The streets were mostly empty, just a few distant headlights and the occasional late-night jogger. When I pulled into the lot behind my apartment building, I felt a bit of relief. Home always felt safe. I turned off the engine, grabbed my bag, and headed inside without thinking much about it. I had just stepped into my room, still in the process of kicking off my shoes, when my phone buzzed. A Snapchat notification. That wasn't unusual. I'd been getting messages all night from people at the party. But when I opened it, my stomach clenched. It was a photo of my car, taken under the glow of the street lamp in the parking lot. No caption, just 2 words. See you later. I froze. I hadn't shared my address with anyone new. That meant whoever sent this had followed me home. I quickly checked the username, but it was one of those generic accounts. No profile picture, no name I recognized. My mind raced through the crowd at the club. There had been a lot of people, and I had talked to plenty of them, but no one had stood out as particularly strange. Still, this wasn't some drunk friend playing a joke. The angle of the photo, the timing, it meant someone had been waiting, watching. I locked my doors, double-checked the windows, and sat in bed with my phone in my hand. I wanted to ignore it, pretend it was nothing, but my gut told me otherwise. I took a screenshot of the message and blocked the account. Then I turned off notifications and forced myself to sleep, though it took hours before I actually did. The next morning, I woke up still feeling unsettled. I told myself it had to be a coincidence, maybe someone from school who happened to recognize my car. Still, as I walked out to the lot, I found myself glancing around, scanning the parked cars and nearby windows for anyone watching. Nothing seemed off, but the feeling lingered. When I got to campus, I had almost convinced myself I was overreacting. But then my phone buzzed again. Another Snapchat. My fingers hesitated before opening it. It was another photo of my car. This time, It was parked in the college lot. The caption read, "Cute car." My hands felt cold. This wasn't a coincidence. Whoever it was had followed me from home to school. They were close enough to take the photo without me noticing. My eyes darted around the parking lot, searching for anyone lingering, but there were too many people, students walking between classes, standing by their cars, looking at their phones. No one stood out. I forced myself to stay calm. Panicking wouldn't help. Instead, I walked straight to the campus security office. Inside, a bored-looking guard glanced up from his desk. I explained the situation, showed him the screenshots, and waited for some kind of reassurance. Instead, he frowned and shook his head. "We can't track anonymous accounts. Nothing we can really do except suggest you be careful." Be careful. That was it. Like I hadn't already thought of that. Frustrated but trying to stay logical, I went to the police station next. I filed a report, showed them the messages, and explained everything as clearly as I could. They listened, nodded, and took down the details. But in the end, their response wasn't much better than campus security's. "As of now, there's no direct threat. If anything escalates, let us know. In the meantime, stay vigilant." That was all they could do. I took every precaution I could think of. I started parking in different spots every day, never sticking to a routine. I asked my friend to walk with me to and from classes. I stopped going out alone at night, even for quick errands. But just as I started to feel a little more in control, another message came through. "You can't hide from me that easily." My stomach twisted as I stared at the screen. They knew I was trying to avoid them. This wasn't random. It was deliberate, like they wanted me to know they were watching. The police had told me not to respond, not to engage in any way, and I had been doing my best to follow that advice. But ignoring it didn't make it any easier. Every time my phone buzzed, my pulse spiked, and I braced myself for another message, another reminder that someone out there was focused on me. I started seeing things, or at least I thought I did. A car behind me, making the same turns I did, staying just far enough back that I couldn't be sure if it was really following me. Sometimes it would turn away at the last second, and I'd tell myself I was imagining it, that I was being paranoid. But was I? Or was I just losing track of what was real and what wasn't? The uncertainty was worse than anything. I never knew when I was truly alone. One night, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking my blinds, listening for sounds outside. I felt like I was losing my mind, jumping at nothing. But then, something. A pair of headlights, sitting motionless at the far end of my street. I stood frozen by the window, barely breathing. The car wasn't moving, wasn't idling like someone just checking their phone. It was too still. It was watching. I grabbed my phone and called the police, whispering even though I knew they couldn't hear me. The moment I hit dial, the car's headlights flickered, and then, just like that, it sped away. When the patrol car arrived, the street was empty. No witnesses, no evidence. Just my word against nothing. The officer took my statement, but didn't seem convinced. "Are you sure it wasn't just someone parked for a minute?" I wanted to scream. How was I supposed to prove any of this? How could I make them see that this wasn't in my head? But my neighbors hadn't noticed anything, and without proof, I was just another nervous girl calling about shadows. I thought about telling my parents, but what could they do? They were hours away. If I told them, they'd just worry themselves sick, and they still wouldn't be able to protect me. So I kept it to myself. I felt trapped, helpless, and more alone than ever. Months passed. No more messages, no strange cars, no one lurking outside. It should have been a relief, but it wasn't. The silence didn't feel like safety. It felt like waiting. The police never found anything. The Snapchat account disappeared. Whoever it was had either lost interest or found someone new to fixate on. My friends told me I'd probably freaked out over nothing, that it was some idiot playing a joke. Maybe they were right. Maybe I had overreacted. But even now, I don't feel safe. I double-check my locks every night. I never park in the same place twice. I make sure I'm never alone for too long. Maybe the danger is gone. Maybe it was never real to begin with. Or maybe they're still out there, watching, just waiting for me to let my guard down. Classes were in full swing, and I was trying not to miss any opportunity to meet new people. So when someone named Rick added me on Snapchat, introducing himself as a classmate, I didn't think much of it. He started talking about this huge party coming up, said half the class was going, that there'd be music, games, good company. Sounded like one of those unofficial college events, the kind you hear about through word of mouth. I asked a few people if they'd heard of a party that weekend. No one had. That was the first weird thing. But Rick insisted it was happening. Said they found an old building perfect for it. Big space, no one to bother them. He sent me a picture of the place. It was a large hall with old columns, looked kind of like an abandoned warehouse. Something about it felt off, but I figured maybe it was one of those underground parties only a few people knew about. Sometimes those turned out to be the best ones. That night, I got in my car and drove to the address he gave me. The area was industrial, lots of empty warehouses and garages, barely any streetlights. When I got there, I saw a faint glow in the distance and a few cars parked haphazardly near a rundown building. There were some dim lights inside, and from far away, I could just barely hear something that might have been music. I texted Rick, "I'm here." No reply. As I got closer, I noticed a few people standing by the entrance, smoking. They were watching me, giving me a once-over like they were sizing me up. Something about it made me uneasy. Still, I figured I'd at least check. Maybe the party was inside. Maybe I just didn't recognize these guys. I stopped a few steps away and asked, "You guys here for Rick's party?" They glanced at each other. One of them smirked, exhaled smoke through his nose. "Yeah, something like that." I walked further into the hall, and it was way too quiet. No groups of people, no snack tables, no real music. Just a few people leaning against the walls, staring at their phones, occasionally glancing up at me. Something about the whole setup felt wrong. From the far corner, I suddenly heard a noise, like someone moving. More people coming in? I wasn't sure, but the sound made me tense up. I hesitated, then called out, "Rick, you here?" Silence. Something in my gut twisted. The place felt abandoned, like no one had actually come here to party. The few people inside weren't talking, weren't laughing, just watching. The whole thing felt staged, like I had walked into something that wasn't meant for me. I turned around and headed for the exit. As I did, I heard footsteps behind me. Not hurried, but deliberate, like someone following at a steady pace. Then, my phone buzzed. "Where are you? We're inside already." It was from Rick. I turned slightly, scanning the room. Nobody looked like they were waiting for a party. No one even reacted to my phone going off. That was all I needed. I bolted. Pushing through the door, I sprinted to my car, heart pounding. I didn't wait to check if anyone was behind me. I just got in, locked the doors, and floored it. I didn't stop until I was miles away, parked outside a 24-hour diner. My hands were shaking. Then, another text came through. "Too bad you left. We were just about to meet." I stared at the screen, breathing hard. They had lured me there. There was never a party. The next day, I told some friends what happened. They convinced me to go to the police. I showed them the messages, described the building, the people. The officers took it seriously, said they'd check the place out, but also warned me to be more careful in the future. A couple of days later, I saw a news report. Police had arrested a group in that same area. They'd been luring in young guys through social media, robbing them when they showed up alone. I don't know what would have happened if I had stayed, but I'm pretty sure I got lucky. Rick's account never messaged me again. It was gone. Since then, I've been a lot more careful about exclusive parties, because some invites aren't just about having fun. I noticed something was wrong when my friends started messaging me, asking, "What's up with those weird videos you're posting?" But I hadn't posted anything that day, especially not any videos. I opened Snapchat to check, but I couldn't log in. My password wasn't working, and when I tried to reset it, the recovery email seemed different, like it had been changed. This all happened in just a few hours, and I had no idea who was behind it. Then, one of my friends sent me a screenshot of my story. The video showed a dark, empty apartment hallway. The camera moved slowly, like someone was sneaking around, and in the background, there was heavy breathing. It looked disturbing, like someone was watching someone else without them knowing. But the worst part? It was posted under my name, with my profile picture. It looked like I was the one who recorded it. I sat there, staring at the screen, my mind racing. This wasn't just some prank. Someone had full control of my account. And they weren't just posting random nonsense. They were uploading something creepy and deliberate. My first instinct was to call my best friend, Laura. She picked up immediately. "Did you see the video?" I asked. "Yeah. What the hell, dude? That's not you, right?" "Of course not. I got hacked. I can't even log in." There was a pause. "Okay, that's seriously freaky. It looks like a stalker or something." I swallowed hard. That's exactly what it looked like. But who would do this? And why? I spent the next hour trying everything to recover my account. Password resets, security questions, even emailing Snapchat support. Nothing worked. The hacker had locked me out completely. And while I was scrambling to fix it, they kept posting. Another friend sent me a new screenshot, a close-up of a locked door, shot from outside, like someone was standing right in front of it. The caption was just a single emoji. That's when I realized, this wasn't random. Whoever did this wasn't just messing around. They were watching someone, maybe even following them, and they were doing it under my name. While I was trying to contact Snapchat support, messages started coming in from people I didn't even know. Random accounts were DMing me, asking, "What's going on? Is this a joke? Are you okay?" I tried to respond when I could, explaining that I'd been hacked and to ignore anything suspicious. But things kept getting worse. Someone, whoever had my account, was now messaging my friends directly. Not just posting creepy videos, but actually reaching out to people in my name. Laura was the first to tell me. "Hey, your account just asked me where I live." "What?" My stomach dropped. I thought maybe it was you trying to prove it's really you or something. But then I saw you were texting me on your real number. So, yeah, not you. I opened Instagram and saw even more messages from friends. "Why are you asking where I work? Why do you need my schedule? Are you messing with me?" I frantically told everyone the same thing. I was hacked. Don't answer. Block the account. But the damage was already happening. People were responding, thinking they were talking to me. They were giving out details, addresses, workplaces, daily routines. Whoever was behind this wasn't just trying to ruin my life. They were fishing for information about the people around me, I was boiling with frustration. I had no way to stop it. Snapchat support was taking forever to respond, sending me generic messages about account security. Meanwhile, my hacked account kept going, posting, messaging, collecting details, and I had no idea what they planned to do next. After a while, I noticed it wasn't just Snapchat. My email had multiple security alerts about unfamiliar logins, and old photos on my social media had strange, mocking comments. It was clear the hacker wasn't just playing around. They wanted to ruin my online reputation, humiliate me. But the scariest part was still Snapchat. The stories kept coming, and they weren't random anymore. They were connected to my daily routine. One evening, I went to the supermarket like I always did. Nothing seemed unusual, just regular people shopping, aisles full of groceries, background noise of checkout beeps and quiet conversations. I grabbed my usual items, paid, and went home. An hour later, a new video appeared on my Snapchat story. It was footage of the same supermarket, the same aisles, the same shelves I had been standing in front of. Whoever had my account wasn't just messing with me from behind a screen. They were following me, watching me, and they wanted me to know it. I scrolled through the comments under the post. Some of my friends were confused, some were joking, but a few were starting to sound genuinely worried. One of them, Ben, messaged me privately. "This is getting really weird. Are you okay?" I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know what to think. I hadn't noticed anyone watching me at the store. But then again, why would I? It was a public place. It could have been anyone. The thought made my skin crawl. The next morning, I barely left my room. I kept checking my phone, waiting for another post, another message, something. And sure enough, around midday, another story went up. It was a short clip of a street. My street. The camera moved slowly, panning toward my building. No caption this time, just silence. I decided I couldn't handle this alone anymore. I went to the police. I told them everything. About the hacking, the videos, the messages asking for my friend's personal details. They listened, took notes, asked a few questions. But when I asked what they could do, the answer wasn't reassuring. "These kinds of digital crimes take time to investigate," one of the officers said. "We'll file a report, but tracking the person behind this might not be quick." I could tell from his tone that they didn't see it as an urgent threat, just another case of online harassment. That night, I changed every password I could think of. A friend who was good with tech helped me regain access to my email, setting up extra security. But Snapchat was still out of my control, and whoever had it kept posting. Dark, blurry footage of quiet streets, shots of apartment buildings, a shaky close-up of a door handle, and then a message written in the caption of one video. "I'm closer than you think." I stopped going out unless I absolutely had to. When I did, I kept looking over my shoulder, scanning every face in public, wondering if one of them was the person doing this. The posts didn't come every day, but they kept coming. For 2 weeks, I lived in a constant state of paranoia, trying to act normal, trying to ignore the fact that someone, somewhere, was watching. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. One morning, I woke up and found that my Snapchat password had finally been reset. I logged in, half expecting another disturbing video, but the last post had been 3 days ago. Since then, nothing. No new messages, no activity. It was like the hacker had just lost interest. I immediately wiped my account, deleted contacts, changed my username, set up every layer of security possible. I wanted to erase everything that connected me to this nightmare. When I followed up with the police, they had nothing for me. "These people do this for fun sometimes," one of them said. "They move on. That stuck with me. To them, my life was just a game, a passing amusement. I should have felt relieved that it was over, that they were gone. But the truth is, I didn't. Because it wasn't really over. It only ended because they chose to stop. And if they, or someone else, decided to start again, there'd be nothing stopping them. I'm just a regular college student, renting a small room in a quiet neighborhood. The area is full of little houses with neatly trimmed lawns, and I've always liked how peaceful it is. Nothing ever really happens here. It's the kind of place where people walk their dogs at sunset and wave to each other from their porches. I never thought I'd have a reason to feel unsafe. One evening, I was sitting on my bed, scrolling through my phone, when I got a Snapchat notification. It was from a username I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was some spam bot, but when I opened it, my stomach dropped. The message was just a photo, no text, no context, but I recognized what I was looking at immediately. It was my house. More specifically, my front yard, my small porch light glowing in the dusk, and in the foreground, the front of a car with dark tinted windows. I got up and looked out my window. There it was, the same car, parked right across the street. The streetlights didn't reach that far, so I couldn't see inside, but it was just sitting there, engine off, completely still. My first thought was that maybe it was a delivery driver who got lost, but something about it felt wrong. Why send me that picture? And who even was this person? After a few minutes of just standing there, watching, I decided to step outside. I wasn't sure what I was planning to do. Maybe just get a closer look. I left the porch light on and walked slowly toward the sidewalk. The second my foot touched the pavement, the car's engine roared to life. I froze for a second, and then it took off, tires screeching as it sped down the street and disappeared around the corner. I stood there for a long moment, heart pounding, watching the empty road. My brain was scrambling for an explanation. Maybe it really was just some lost driver. Maybe they got nervous when they saw me coming out. Maybe it was just some weird prank. That had to be it. But even as I went back inside, locked the door, and turned off the lights, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just seen something I wasn't supposed to. A couple of days passed, and I started to convince myself that it wasn't a big deal. No more messages came, no strange cars parked outside. I told myself it was probably just some dumb joke, and I should forget about it. Then, late at night, my phone buzzed again. Another Snapchat notification. Same unknown username. My hands felt cold as I swiped to open it. It was another photo. Same angle, same car. It had been taken from the street, pointed directly at my house. Except this time, there was text under it. Just 3 words. Nice little yard. A shiver ran down my spine. That meant whoever was in that car wasn't just stopping there randomly. They were watching my house. They knew who I was, and they wanted me to know that they were watching. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. My mind was racing. Who the hell was this? Someone messing with me? A neighbor? Some creep I didn't know? My room felt too exposed, so I moved to the side, out of sight of the window, and checked outside. No car this time. Just an empty, silent street. The next morning, I decided to ask around. I knocked on my neighbor's door, an older woman who'd lived there for years. I tried to keep it casual. "Hey, have you noticed any strange cars parked outside recently?" She frowned. "No, can't say I have. Everything okay?" "Yeah, just thought I saw someone hanging around the other night." "Probably nothing." I asked a couple of other people too, but nobody had seen anything. No one seemed concerned. It was just me. I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was just some idiot trying to mess with me. I could block the account, stop looking at the messages. But that night, another one came. You should be careful at night. I stared at the screen, feeling like the floor had just shifted under me. It wasn't a direct threat, but it wasn't nothing either. I went to the police. I showed them the screenshots, described the car, a sedan with no front license plate. Maybe it had been removed, or maybe it was just covered in dirt. The officer I spoke to listened carefully, nodded, and told me that if I ever saw it again, I should call immediately, and they'd send someone over. But without a clear threat, they couldn't do much yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by my window, lights off, phone in my hand, just waiting. It was quiet for hours, just the occasional passing car or a dog barking somewhere in the distance. I started thinking maybe I was overreacting. Maybe whoever it was had already moved on. Then, right around midnight, I saw it. A faint glow, then the familiar dark shape of the car pulling up to the curb. My pulse hammered. I had to act fast. I grabbed my phone, turned on the camera, and rushed to the front door. I barely hesitated before stepping outside, hoping I'd get close enough this time to see a plate, a face, anything. But the second my door creaked open, the car's headlights flashed on, the engine roared, and it sped off, tires kicking up dust. I ran after it a few steps, but it was pointless. It disappeared down the road before I even had time to register anything useful. My hands were shaking as I called the police. Within 10 minutes, a patrol car arrived, but by then, there was nothing left to see. They took my statement, noted the repeated incidents, and assured me they'd increase patrols in the area. But I could tell they weren't convinced this was serious. And maybe they were right. Maybe it was just some idiot messing with me. But I wasn't so sure anymore. From that night on, I felt like I was living in a constant state of paranoia. I checked the window every half hour, barely focusing on anything else. My friends started making jokes, saying I was acting like the main character in a thriller. I laughed it off, but deep down, I knew this wasn't just in my head. The car kept coming back. Not every night, but often enough to keep me on edge. Sometimes every other night, sometimes with a few days in between. It never did anything, just sat there, engine off, completely still, watching. The messages didn't stop either. Every so often, a new Snapchat notification would pop up. Always the same kind of thing. New photos, small, taunting captions. Still watching the window? The worst part was that I never caught them. Every time I saw the car and stepped outside, it was already pulling away before I could even get a real look. It felt like a game, and I was losing. One night, I stared out my window for hours, and I swore I saw movement inside the car. A shadow shifting in the driver's seat. Or maybe there were two people in there. My stomach twisted at the thought. I called the police again. By the time they arrived, the car was long gone. They noted the report, but I could tell they weren't hopeful about catching the guy. And honestly, I was starting to lose hope too. I thought about moving. I really did. But I couldn't afford it, not on my budget. And something about the idea of running away just felt wrong. Like I'd be giving this guy exactly what he wanted. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. No more messages. No more parked car. Nothing. Days passed, then a week, then 2. At first, I was relieved. But as time went on, relief turned into something else. Unease. I didn't know why it had stopped. The police never caught anyone. Nobody was arrested. There was no reason for it to just end like that. Had they just gotten bored? Moved on to someone else? Sometimes, late at night, I still catch myself checking the window, expecting to see that dark shape waiting at the curb. I don't know if this is really over or if they're just waiting for the right moment to come back. When I moved to a new city, I felt lonely during the first week. To find people to talk to, I used the Add Nearby feature on Snapchat and added a few people who were also in the area. One girl posted about the best places in town, another guy invited me to baseball games, and someone else just joked around. I thought it was an easy way to integrate into the local community. At first, everything seemed normal. We chatted a few times in real life, but I didn't become close friends with anyone. I didn't really keep track of who I gave my exact address to or who had seen my apartment. I was bored and wanted to trust people, so I shared details freely. When I met someone for the first time, I didn't think much about mentioning what part of town I lived in or showing them my street on a map. Some of them shared their locations too, so it felt normal. A couple of times, I even invited people over when I was drinking at home and wanted company. It didn't seem like a big deal. A couple of weeks later, I got a strange message. "You forgot to lock your door again." I stared at it for a second. The timestamp showed it was sent about 30 minutes ago, right when I had gone to the store and come back. I hadn't locked the door immediately after returning. I felt a cold sweat on my back. None of my new acquaintances should have known where I lived. And why would they? I walked over and checked the front door. It was shut, but when I turned the lock, I realized it had been left unlocked the entire time. Someone could have walked in while I was gone. My first thought was that someone had actually entered my apartment. I moved through the rooms quickly, checking for any signs that something was out of place. My wallet was on the table, laptop still in its usual spot, nothing obviously missing. I tried to remember exactly how I had left things before I went out, but I wasn't sure. I went through my contacts on Snapchat, trying to figure out who could have sent that message. No one admitted to it, and some of them hadn't even been online recently. That made me even more uneasy. It meant whoever was messaging me might have been using a different name, hiding behind some anonymous account. In real life, they could be anyone. For the next few days, I started double and triple checking my door whenever I left. I'd turn the lock, walk away, then come back just to make sure. But the thought wouldn't leave my mind. This person knew too much. They saw what I was doing inside my apartment. Were they watching from another building? Maybe they lived nearby, keeping an eye on my door to see if the key was turned or not. The idea made me feel sick. Every time I walked outside, I looked at the windows of the other apartments, trying to see if someone was standing behind the curtains. But the buildings all looked the same. Too many windows, too many places to hide. Then the messages got worse. One night, I got another one. "Don't you think it's a little too quiet at night?" Then, another. "I hope you have a better lock than that." That was it. I had to do something. The next morning, I went to a hardware store and bought a stronger lock. One with a reinforced bolt. I changed it myself, making sure I was the only one with a key. I also installed a small security camera above my door, just a basic one that recorded whenever someone came close. After that, the messages stopped. The account went silent the moment I mentioned security. It was like they could tell I was ready to fight back. I didn't get any more messages, and the camera never caught anything unusual. But I haven't been the same since. Every time I put my key in the lock, I remember that first message. "You forgot to lock your door again." I keep thinking, who was it? Which one of those people I talked to was behind this? I deleted most of my contacts, but I never found out. Now, I just live with this quiet certainty. Maybe they got bored and moved on. But if they ever wanted to come back, They know exactly where to find me. And I'll never know why.